You are Locked On Patriots, your daily New England Patriots podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all of you Foxborough faithful, and thank you once again for making Locked On Patriots a daily part of your New England Patriots coverage and also your first listen every day. Remember, Locked On Patriots, free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. So make sure to smash that subscribe button and download, subscribe to, and follow Locked On Patriots wherever you get your podcasts. I'm your host, Mike Debate. I cover your New England Patriots for Patriots Country of Sports Illustrated. Also your host here on Locked On, also a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Remember, folks, because it's your team every day, that means your questions, comments, and feedback are always welcomed and very much appreciated. So share that feedback and send it to the internet by reaching out to me, following me on the Bird app at MDABATENFL. While you're out there showing some love to that Twitterverse, please be sure to follow the Locked On Patriots account as well at LO_Patriots. Folks, it is midweek. It is a holiday week here on Locked On Patriots, but it is also still technically midweek, even though it's a Thursday. If it's midweek, it means two things this week, folks. First of all, time to open up that musty old Locked On Patriots midweek mailbag. Been a little while since we've done that, but we have some amazing questions for you today. Cole Strange, Malcolm Butler, all the anything you can think of, even drainage on the Patriots football field. We're covering it all today for you. And who else would I invite to open the Locked On Patriots mailbag with me than the resident lady of Locked On, the mediator of midweek herself. There's a new name for you.
A new one. That's like
the illustrious Clare, ClazzyClare Cooper of Pat's Propaganda and, of course, her very own Patriots podcast, folks. A Clare perspective, definitely smash the subscribe button. Check that out. You will not be disappointed. One of the best Patriots listens out there. My personal favorite other than Locked On Patriots. Claire, thank you for joining me today. Welcome back to the hot seat here on Locked On Patriots.
It's okay. It feels a little bit weird. It's Thursday, not Wednesday. I'm over here a little bit. I should be over here a little bit.
Well, you know what? It's always good to mix things up a little bit. Variety is the spice of life, right, Claire? So, normally we come to you on a Wednesday, but because it's the holiday week, we decided Thursday would be a good option, folks. So gave you the opportunity to check out a little bit earlier this week, and now we are here. So you know what, Claire? Let's get right down to business. Let's get right into that Locked On Patriots midweek mailbag. And thank you to all of you that submitted some phenomenal questions. Tried to get to them all, but we did get to the highlights. But all of the questions that you submitted will be answered. And we start off with a question, a very good question from our good friend, Patriots Feeder. Patriots Feeder has always been a very big supporter, not only of Locked On Patriots. He's participated in some question and answer sessions with you, I know, Claire. He's also submitted questions for my formerly Patriot Maven mailbag, now the Patriots Country mailbag with Sports Illustrated. And he's always intriguing when it comes to the things that he likes to ask regarding your New England Patriots. His question was interesting, and I want to get to that one right now. And he said, no one's been able to answer this, so let's see if Claire can be the first. Is the Gillette field the only field where the center line between the hashes, where the quarterback would be, is a few feet higher than the sideline, and the pitch tapers from the center? Is that normal? Well, Countess, you definitely the question got me intrigued without any question, but you intrigued me by your initial response to this question, because it really did make me think a little bit. I know that technically a properly designed grass football field or a turf football field doesn't lie perfectly flat. The surface of the field, the arcs, the foot, the sidelines, the midfield, you have to allow excess water to drain off. And you were the one that kind of brought up the subject of drainage. So I want to thank you for that, because I really do believe that you kind of got the ball rolling. I did a little investigative work. Claire did a little investigative work on this Patriots feeder, and we really did come up with some interesting topics. And you had mentioned drainage, Claire. What made you think of drainage right off the bat? Because it really does, it's common sense, but it's something that not a lot of people would think of right off the bat either.
Well, I hate to kind of like really take much kudos, but it was just a bit of common sense, really. To be honest, it was the case of, and then I did sort of Google it to see if I was right in regards to the drainage, and you do come across some answers of without a crown. So like the in the middle, the surface kind of it would ultimately be dangerous. So you've got to think about that. I know there's a lot of sort of discussions in regards to turf and astroturf and stuff like that. But basically, if it was flat, the water would pool. And if it would pool, then it wears away at the grass or it ruins away at the astroturf, that kind of thing. So yeah, that was the initial. Really, I only kind of dragged off from common sense of you need a drain away because it's in so many of the things like houses and stuff like that. You've always got that element of a draining away sort of a gradient. That's the word I was after. There's always some kind of gradient in regard to that. So yeah, all fields that are grass will have some form of non-flatness, shall we say, some form of crown to enable the draining away of the water to maintain it not to being a dangerous surface for the game. But I know that you kind of went that one step further and looked into this one step more, Michael. So what did you come up with?
Well, there are. And when you're talking about an artificial turf, such as the one in which the Patriots do play, you're looking at a situation where soil is not as much of a concern. But there are different concerns about how this type of slope will affect. And Jim McAfee, who did a great job with Texas A&M University for years, he's an expert on sports field design and maintenance. He was basically the one that kind of validated what you had said and really was the focus of my research when you look at it, because a field without a crown or a field with an inadequate crown, water is quickly going to pond, whether you're dealing with, whether you're dealing with natural surfaces or not. That's what's going to happen. And I think you articulated that perfectly in terms of crowns, in terms of pooling. The water is going to build up, and you don't want unsafe playing conditions because you don't want guys slipping and sliding out there. No. You don't want, if there's a situation where it's freezing rain or you're dealing with, temperatures that are right on the border, we do here in New England. You don't want ice forming. There's a lot of different, problems that could arise. You want to make sure that the playing field is as flat as possible. But once the crown has done its job, it's gotten water off the field, you have to have adequate drainage to move the water away from the sidelines as well. And here's, Feeder, where your question comes into play, why it's a little bit higher in the crown and a little bit less high on the sidelines, why it pitches a little bit different. Jim McAfee noted that many football fields, such as Gillette Stadium, do use, their stadium for other sports, and particularly soccer. And the New England Revolution are, their home stadium is Gillette Stadium. Designers have to take all of those uses on the field into account when determining the crown height, when determining the field slope. They can't build a field in which football players are going to stay dry, but soccer players find themselves ankles deep in puddles or problems and things of that nature. So the fact that Gillette Stadium's dimensions may be a little bit different from what we usually see in the National Football League definitely has something to do with that. Now, he also made a point that, maybe it's a little bit to do with some of the competitive advantage that the Patriots like to think that they have, and teams like to think that they have a little bit of a competitive advantage when it comes to that. If there are reasons for that, and you really have, I think I think articulated that very well. He made the point that easier balls over the corner, which means the pass rush is constantly working uphill. The defensive line, especially on the edges, have a slight advantage, also allows for quicker outs. Those are all byproducts of the pitch. And if we're figuring it out, or if the feeder is figuring it out, the Patriots are figuring that out as well. They're learning how to play the territory. Now, to say that it was designed for that purpose, I think is a massive stretch. I really, really don't believe that is indeed the case. But they will learn how to play for your terrain. For example, if you move to a situation, if you move to a house that's, very, at a higher elevation or at a lower elevation, it's going to change the way that you care for the land. It's going to change the way that you pitch a driveway, things of that nature. You're going to adapt to your environment. That very well could be a byproduct. So Patriots Feeder, I hope we were able to shed a little bit of light on what you had said. The quick, compact, and the very accurate answer is exactly what Claire had articulated. It is indeed drainage. And one of the reasons why that the dimensions are a little bit different is because the Patriots are home to the New England Revolution, who, last I checked, soccer team, they can definitely benefit from that as well. So excellent question. I'm glad that this question was asked, and just an unusual question to start off the midweek mailbag here today, Claire. So thank you for your insight. Thank you for your ingenuity, kind of getting the ball rolling. And see, we do make a good team, folks. That's one of the things that I do enjoy each and every week.
I'd like to just throw a thing in there as well as a follow-up to his question. If, however, he would like me to go round to every stadium to ascertain if all have crowns, please set up a GoFundMe, and I would more than welcome if you would like to fund that that project. I would happily undertake that for you. So if you do want experience at every single stadium, please just get in touch.
I can see it now. We can even get computer games. Where in the world is Claire Cooper? We can put, really, it'll be great, folks. We really will. We can send, camera crews all around. We can follow her all around the world. Where's Claire this week? Where is she next week? I think, and I think you're the perfect person to do that too. So, as long as you take time out
each crown, it's fine.
As long as you take time out during your travels to come here each and every week on Locked On Patriots and report back, then we're cool with it. So, all kidding aside, folks, we'll gladly send Claire around the world, but on other people's dimes, not ours. We are just scratching the surface here, folks, when it comes to opening the midweek mailbag. We got some great questions on the offensive line this week, and Claire and I are going to discuss those in just a moment. Cole Strange might be a topic that we discuss, but it definitely will not be limited to the rookie. A lot of questions on the O-line, and Claire and I are going to discuss those in just a moment when this mailbag episode of the Locked On Patriots podcast continues. But first, summer is here, folks. Not just coming. 4th of July is come and gone here in the States, and the dog days of summer are about to begin. And with summer, you need food on the go. You need that constant ability to keep fueled and to make sure that you're ready for all of the adventures that you have planned this summer. Built Bars are the perfect snack to take with you on family vacations, outings, business trips. No matter where you go, you definitely want to have a Built Bar at your disposal. Throw them in your bags, in your kids' backpacks. Make sure that everyone has a bar so you are fueled for your summer adventures. The best part about Built Bars is they're healthy, they're delicious. No more sacrificing delicious food for health. With Built Bar, you can have both. And it's easy. All you have to do is go to Built.com and order now. All Built Bars and Puffs are covered in 100% real chocolate. That means that with Built Bar, you can eat healthy. You can actually enjoy doing it. So don't delay. Do it today. Visit Built.com. Enter the promo code LOCK15 for 15% off your next order. That's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off your next order at Built.com. Patriots fans, it is midweek mailbag time here on Locked On Patriots, and joining me as always in the midweek is the resident lady of Locked On, the Countess of Claz herself, Miss Claire ClazzyClare Cooper of Pat's Propaganda and A Claire Perspective, a Patriots podcast. Claire, in the previous segment, we had a little fun talking Gillette Stadium turf and drainage. Subject, albeit we really haven't discussed all that much here on Locked On Patriots in the past.
So the offseason.
But I do want to give a lot of credit to the Patriots Feeder for that great question. Folks, I highly recommend a follow on that account, at Patriots Feeder, all one word. Really, just some great insight, some great entertaining questions, but also this guy knows his football as well. So definitely be sure to follow that account and give it its just due. Thank you so much for the great question. But again, we're just scratching the surface when it comes to great questions here on Locked On Patriots. And the offensive line continues to be a hot button topic. You would have thought it would have been, wide receivers. You might have thought it would be a little bit of tight endage, and we're going to get into a little bit of tight endage. Claire doesn't know it yet, but we are going to get into it. And also, look, I just surprised her. Don't worry. Do not worry. You didn't think we weren't going to talk tight endage and have you on. It's just not done. But anyway, we did get some interesting offensive line questions. And let's start off with a question from a phenomenal friend of the program, a phenomenal friend of both of ours, Joel Shapiro. Joel Shapiro 20. Joel from Hull, you know him on his Twitter. Joel is a great person, huge support of the show. And a huge support of ours, and just a great individual. So, Joel, thank you, as always, for taking time out to ask this question. And Claire, I'm going to start, and I'm going to throw this to your court. I'm going to allow the Countess to prognosticate on Joel's question here. And he wants to know if you're concerned about the changes with the offensive line, and what player on the offensive line are you watching the closest?
Okay, firstly, I haven't been quiet in admitting I do have some concerns when it comes to the offensive line. And I've often said I'm a bit of an O-line girl myself. So, big David Andrews fan, big centre fan. So, yeah, I do. My main concern is a lot of people will talk about depth. They do have some depth. Obviously, this is prior to the roster reduction, that sort of thing. So at the moment, they do have some depth when it comes to the O-line. And there's a lot of talk about shuffling in regards to moving Trent Brown, where Onwenu is going to fit in, if Isaiah Wynn is even going to stay. Although at the moment, at the beginning of July, he is still in the building, shall we say. So whether or not he's going to be moved on for the cap space, it's kind of watch this space in regards to that. But yeah, there's plenty of sort of names there. There's definitely guys that were here last year that not sure how big on them I am. I know other people are when it comes to Kajust and that sort of thing. But the sort of carousel that's being discussed at the moment, or sort of hinted at the moment, is something that has me slightly worried, because we started last season with a bit of an offensive line carousel, and that was mainly because of injury, because Trent Brown was injured quite early, and it just seemed to take them a while to really get sort of slotted in. Now, a lot of that could have done with the fact that they were in front of a rookie quarterback who was literally playing his first few games, and there's going to definitely be a ripple effect in regards to that. So it could be the fact that Mac Jones is much more stable. Maybe the O-line will naturally be a bit more stable. It's all the time will tell yet, really. But yeah, I'm looking forward to finding out who I should say the offensive line is going to be, and hoping that when they start the season, it's something that's a little bit more set maybe than it was sort of last season, if you like. In regards to who I'm looking at, a lot of people are going to pick Cole Strange because rookie guy, first round pick. We want to see what he's got. There's a lot of talk that he's an immediate starter. Obviously, we still don't know, but there's a lot of talk, and you'd sort of assume that matter, and you wouldn't be stupid in doing that. So, but the guy that I'm very interested in, and it's less to do with the fact that there's less chance that he's going to be a straight starter. He may not even be on the roster, but I've mentioned his name a few times, and it's Drew Desjardins from the CFL. Now, I know a lot of people have kind of got opinions that, the CFL isn't the NFL. Granted, of course it's not. And maybe the guy's not going to really be all that sort of thing. But I read quite a few good things in regards to him, about how he was a first-round pick in the CFL and how he played really well and things like that. So I'm really interested to see if he's a starter. And if he is, he's definitely a guy that I'm going to keep my sharp eye on, as you like to say. I'm just very intrigued. I sort of have heard a lot of good things, read a lot of good things. But obviously, because of the CFL thing, a lot of people have got a much sort of lesser opinion, shall we say, in regards to him, and that's fair enough. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion, but he's definitely an O-lineman that I'm interested to see what he brings to the table, what the CFL has kind of done for him in the past to bring his experience to the NFL, and how that translates, if it translates. There's always the fact that he can be a complete bust, and we know this. any player can be a complete bust. So I've got to admit, rather than pick the sort of the common one that I guess everybody's interested in, I am interested into seeing what Cole Stranger's got. As I said, as I have mentioned, I am an O-line kind of girl, but Drew Desjardins, he's the one guy that I'm very interested to see, looking forward to seeing, and hoping that I get to see him start. And maybe he's a little bit of, a dark horse or a diamond in the rough that in the middle of the season, you'll all be saying, "Oh, and Claire said to look at Drew Desjardins, and look at him, he's amazing." So I'm very much hoping for that and looking forward to that.
Well, I'll tell you, the opportunities that he got in the CFL really are intriguing. So I'm looking forward to seeing this kid and watching him interact. Got a very, very small, sample in mini camp, but in training camp, you really get a chance to see what these guys can do. And in that line, the guy that I'm going to be most watching closely is not on the starting rotation, or not yet on the starting rotation, and that's Justin Herron. And the reason why I say that is because Justin did receive a good amount of snaps, starting snaps within OTA and within minicamp because of the absence of Isaiah Wynn, particularly during OTA. Isaiah was present for minicamp, and that's I do want to say that. But with Wynn absent for the voluntary portions of the team's workouts, Herron continued to get extended looks along the line. He took some snaps with the starting unit at right tackle. This is a place where we saw Isaiah Wynn take snaps because Trent Brown had moved over to left. Now, Murph and I have gone back and forth last week on whether or not we believe that Isaiah will slot back over to the left tackle position or whether or not he'll be the right. Murph seems to think he's staying on the right. I still think Isaiah slots back in on the left. I think what the Patriots are doing right now is seeing what these guys can do. It's very early. I'm going to get into how early it really is when it comes to trying to determine what we might see on the field for a finished product here. But if Herron continues to trend in this direction and really continues to catch the sharp eye of the Patriots coaching staff, and I can tell you folks from personal experience, people that I've talked to close to the organization, they're really very high on this kid. They love the positive components that he brings in pass protection. He frames well, keeps his rushers, in front of it. He's still got a little bit of functional strength and body control lacking when it comes to the run game, which is why I believe he ultimately will still be a reserve. But if he can prove that he can be a starting level, offensive lineman, may make things interesting for a possible move with Isaiah Wynn, who I know a lot of people are wondering, do they give Isaiah the big contract and keep him in New England? Or is this the final year, and then we just either let him walk, or they allow him to leave, or do they try to trade him throughout the season until the trade deadline? These are all valid questions, and I think Justin Herron is going to hold the key to a lot of them, because if he steps up and shows that he can be that next man up, things can get very interesting in New England. So, as always, Countess, I think you've done an amazing job. I think you've definitely piqued our interest and my interest on Drew Desjardins. I'll definitely keep a sharp eye on him for you, as will all of the Patriots beat that will be in Gillette within the next couple of weeks. And Joel, thank you very much for the great question. As always, my friend, we always appreciate your support of Locked On Patriots, and thank you for everything, and for most of all for the great question. But I wanted to follow that up with another great offensive line question that we got, Claire. And this one comes from Quality Smoke. That's at Quality Smoke, all one word, folks. And that is, which backup offensive lineman would a shift to a Shanahan zone running scheme not suit, and therefore isolate on the roster? Well, I've got some thoughts on this one, Claire. You were very intrigued by the Shanahan shift. I think Murph and I think we coined the phrase a couple of weeks ago, Shanahanian system. We've done Belichickian, so we're doing Shanahanian now. Everybody goes the Shanahan system. We're calling it the Shanahanian system. So I don't know if Kyle or Mike would like that too much, but you know what, we're going to go with it here on Locked On Patriots. But there are reasons why this type of a shift is being utilized a little bit more in the NFL, but also a big reason why a lot of teams are hesitant to move over to this. Claire, I know you've done your research on the Shanahanian system. That's tough to say. Maybe we will retire it, folks. But it's just a little too tough to say if you haven't had your mega pint of coffee yet. But bottom line, I know you've done your research on this. When you think of the Shanahan rush system, which is the zone, incorporating the zone runs, what do you feel is really beneficial for the Patriots to do here? When you mention that, what do you envision the Patriots offense looking like if they adapt a more Shanahanian running style this season?
Well, I feel that everything that we've sort of seen leading up to the season, the way that they drafted, that kind of thing, sort of reflects these. Maybe not the going to the Shanahanian offensive system. Wow, this is going to be a really difficult one to say. But yeah, it definitely hints towards it because, as you mentioned, the Shanahanian offensive system is kind of it's a wide zone based running game system, very quarterback friendly. So it's good for the
Very
quarterbacks, which. Okay, so Matt Jones is in his second year, but it's always good to give the kid a bit of a break, in all fairness. So, but it can be complex, and it does exclude apparently a lot of standard sort of the more less athletic kind of lumbering offensive linemen, guys that are that their main sort of positiveness is just really their size, and it lends more towards needing offensive linemen that maybe have that size but have athletic ability. And what screams towards that is the Patriots' first round draft pick in Cole Strange. I know we have mentioned him before, but he is an athletic offensive lineman, and they took him. They wanted this guy. They wanted this very athletic offensive lineman. And so that really is what sort of looks to me like they are pushing towards that Shanahanian offensive system, because they took athletic offensive linemen and they also took quite power running backs, and they already have quite power running backs in the fold. So it really kind of hints towards that's what they're looking for. That's the way that they're looking to process their system. Now, okay, the NFL is really migrating into, more of a pass offense, and it has been for a while. But this offensive system has been in place. And I think it's something that it works against the lighter, quicker defenses, and that's how people are evolving as well. There's lots of evolution within the NFL, and I think this is just something. It's just another one of those things that is each team is going to take it and evolve it a little for its own system, but it's still going to have the fundamentals, which is it requires very athletic offensive linemen, and a lot of it is to do with it's a difficult one. From what I understand from the way that I sort of really looked into this, just kind of get a really good idea about it, is it's quite a difficult one to practice, because the way of the movement and the back cutting that they have to do for the offensive lineman to kind of get a hold of the running back, they have to, sorry, not the running back, the defensive guy, is they have to really aim towards his hips, and obviously it puts a higher risk on sort of lower body injury, and obviously the last thing that you need in a training camp is such a risk of injury. So from what I understand, from what I've read and researched, obviously I've never played the game myself, so I can only speak from the experience of researching and looking into this and trying to understand this on a fan level, is that it's something that's difficult to replicate in training camp without the risk of injury. So it's going to be one of those things that it's to be very teachable. You're not able to act it out. You're having to be taught it. So it also puts a lot of, not pressure, but a lot of onus on coaching. It's big in regards to, it has to be sort of known within the coaching, and it's not just the offensive line coach that really needs to be locked on when it comes to this. Locked on, like I did that. But also not like bad. The running back coach,
we like it.
Coach, and the defensive coordinator, needs to be sort of clued in because of the whole, of practicing it. So it's something that's quite complex, and we all know that Bill Belichick likes complex. He likes smart guys, so I'm sure that's, another one of the reasons why he prefers to favour it, because I know he never likes the easy route, does he, Bill Belichick? But yeah, I think in regards to the question itself, I couldn't really give you a specific name, which backup offensive lineman would shift, to the Shanahan zone, simply because I haven't watched every single one of them play over and over again to really see how they hold themselves and how athletic they are. So I'd hate to kind of just pick a name out of the air in regards to that. What I would like to say in how to answer the question is I feel that it's very much the way that the Patriots are building. So I'd be surprised if there's anyone that especially is concluded on the roster that isn't someone that is able to or geared towards that kind of offensive system, because it does seem very much like that's sort of the way that they want to go. And to be honest with you, with the way that the NFL is evolving, the way that the game is migrating, it's becoming more and more having an onus on athletic ability. We're not really seeing just big guys anymore. We're seeing big guys who can really run. I mean, this draft class itself has really it was really obvious. It really declared the big guys having to run quickly. And I think it gives that, it hints that towards just how the NFL itself is evolving and is moving forward. So it may be that eventually the Shanahanian offensive system is kind of an NFL offensive system. But for right now, yeah, I definitely think that it's something that the Patriots are hinting towards, if they're not even fully taking it on board completely.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. I'm so glad that you mentioned the lower body injuries that players can sustain, because that's one of the big reasons why this is so tough to impart onto a new group of pupils. Basically, getting a team to adapt to this system is very difficult. Not so much because it's so difficult to teach, but it's very difficult to be able to teach without the techniques that are there. And that technique that involves really, I think, diving at the turf, trying to get a defender at the hip, a detriment to the runner. It can be a detriment to linemen. You don't want players getting injured in practice while you're trying to institute a new system to begin with. So there are a lot of drawbacks to being able to do this. That being said, the Patriots are not going to run Shanahan's playbook word for word. Bill Belichick, he's going to run a variation on it, his own variation. And we are starting to see that in minicamp. And we did see that in minicamp, particularly a little bit more in OTA. Patriots tweaking their offensive system. We even heard Kendrick Bourne say this earlier this offseason, that the Patriots were instituting a little bit of a new look when it came to their offense. And moving away from the McDaniels type of era where it was, a lot of what, they were doing. There was some trickery involved. There was, running on third downs, things of that nature that I know the fans are going to be glad to see jettisoned. But one thing that McDaniels did very well was provide continuity. And that's something that I think the Patriots are going to struggle with a little bit this year. That's why it's so encouraging to hear of the progress Mac Jones has made, because that continuity, I truly believe, is going to come from the quarterback. And Mac is definitely up for it. But if the Patriots do indeed continue to incorporate more of those Shanahan-style elements offensively in training camp, as they did in minicamp and OTA, that will be a signal to me that they have made that decision to move forward with a shift in that. Source that I spoke to shortly after the conclusion of minicamp says it's very early. It was early June when minicamp wrapped up. And they said, basically, quoting, saying it's a really story at this point. It's not something that the Patriots are going to go on record and say, yeah, we're shifting, we're doing this. Bill Belichick was very coy when asked about it. It's a fair sentiment. There's no question about it. You don't want to go ahead and tip your hand when it comes to what you're going to be incorporating for training camp, but it is going to be interesting to see which linemen are on the inside and on the out. Smoke, your question, we don't mean to fall by the wing side, because the question about which offensive line may find him in this system, well, prior to the beginning of OTA and training camp and minicamp, I would have said Justin Herron, because of the fact that there is a little bit of a lack of physicality, a little bit of a lack in quickness and being able to get into position to be able to defend or stop or protect the run. This is something that Cole Strange does very well. He's a very physical, very athletic lineman, and really moving toward that, that type of mold. You may say somebody, all right, like a Michael Wayne, who is so big that he has difficulty, but he's a much better athlete than his frame gives him credit for. I say the same thing about Trent Brown as well. When he's locked in, he's a little more athletic than people give him credit for as well. So I don't necessarily know if there's anybody on this roster right now that would be on the outside looking in. Herron was a concern of mine. He still will be in training camp if they do progress forward and he's not showing enough growth in that area in terms of enhancing his quickness and his ability to get into position to be able to protect against the run. But he's shown me that he has grown in that area. So to answer your question, Smoke, I think it's going to be a little bit more of needing to see these guys in training camp to find out what they truly have. Herron would have been my answer, but he's not that big of a concern right now because I have seen him make growth in this area. But an excellent question. And I'm glad we got a chance to use the word Shanahanian a little bit, or Shanahanian, I should say, not Shanahanian. There is no Hain there, folks. There's Shanahanian. And we got Clare to come around on that too, so I think that is always good. Clare, it's always fun when we bring up these opportunities to really interact with the great listeners and the insightful listeners here on Locked On Patriots. We're about to interact with questions from one of our very favorites in terms of being a guest, in terms of being a contributor, and in terms of being a fan of Locked On Patriots. The great Miguel Benzon makes his presence felt here in just a moment, folks. He wants to know all about our anticipation for training camp, and Claire and I are going to provide that for you in just a moment when we conclude this episode of the Locked On Patriots podcast. Patriots fans, once again, I am joined by the illustrious ClazzyClare Cooper, columnist extraordinaire, podcast host extraordinaire for Pat's Propaganda and A Clare Perspective, a Patriots podcast, respectively. She is our resident lady of Locked On, the Countess of Class, the Empress of Tight Endage. I can keep going on, but we do have limited time, folks. Claire, in the previous segment, we talked a lot about the offensive line. We've talked about the Patriots' home turf at Gillette Stadium. But we get an opportunity now to dip our toe into a lot of the pool of what the Patriots are going to be dealing with when it comes to training camp coming up in just under 2 weeks when the first Patriots report to Gillette. Some of the rookies will be reporting and some players rehabbing from injury. Always a lot of fun to see these guys come into camp. And one person who is just over the moon every single time training camp rolls around. It's one of his very favorite times of year. It is our good friend, the Pats Cap himself, the great and powerful Wizard of Benzon, the Dean of the Foxborough Finance University here on Locked On Patriots, the great Miguel Benzon. And Miguel asked a couple of questions this week that I wanted to close the week in style, or close, I should say, the show in style. We're not done this week yet, folks. That was a Freudian slip. Miguel starts off with which undrafted rookie free agents will make the Patriots Week 1 roster. And speaking of Week 1 rosters, what position will be filled by a player not currently on the Patriots roster? So in the interest of fairness, Miguel asked 2 questions, kind of rolled into 4. So I'm going to take the opening 2, and then I will leave the Countess of Class to take us home in style here on Locked On Patriots. When it comes to undrafted rookie free agents, I've become sort of a fan of this type of topic. I love discussing it because there is always that streak that the Patriots have alive of trying to keep a undrafted free agent. It looked last year like it was going to fall by the wing side, and then Quinn Nordin makes the roster, and everything comes together. I don't believe it's going to be broken this year. Miguel, to answer your question, the first part of it, in terms of who will be the undrafted rookie free agent, I believe is going to crack the roster this year. I think it's going to be at the defensive tackle position. I think this is a position that the Patriots can use some help in. And I think it's a position that one of their undrafted rookie free agents can come in and make an impact, and that is Alabama's LaBryan Ray. It just wouldn't be a Patriots rookie class unless a member of the Crimson Tide was around. And as luck would have it, the Patriots were able to get this one as an undrafted rookie free agent. Great size for this kid, 6'5", 284, really blends size and athleticism very well. Some off-the-field questions, I think, slipped his draft stock a little bit because I think this kid had a chance to be a draftee, but played 5 full seasons under Nick Saban. That right there tells you he's ready to come in and be a Belichick. Don't spend that much time in a Saban system and not pick up a few pointers to help you in a Belichickian system like he will here. Very adept at stuffing the run, and this is a problem that the Patriots had last year, and I think, and really have had consistently for the last couple of years. They've made strides in that area, but I do think they need a little bit more help there. He can also be very good against the pass as well. 6 sacks, 13.5 tackles for loss during his time in Alabama. So this is a kid that is a very good run stuffer, but he also knows how to defend against the pass. I think that versatility, Miguel, puts him into the roster, but you know, the Patriots ultimately are going to make that decision. The undrafted rookies really didn't pop during minicamp or OTA. I'm really looking forward to seeing who emerges as that camp darling. Every year, there's one of those guys that seems to emerge as the camp guy that just you can't get enough of. And in my opinion, that could end up being someone like a LeBron Ray, although right now it looks like Trey Nixon at the wide receiver position has taken that spot. But the second part of Miguel's question that I wanted to answer as well is which of the Patriots right now, which position on the Patriots roster do you think is going to be filled by a player that's not on the Patriots roster right now? And I don't necessarily know if this is going to come on the starting lineup. I think this is how Miguel meant the question. And Miguel, if I didn't, please correct me if I'm wrong. And I know he will. But
yes, he will.
If that is how you meant it in the starting position, I do think the Patriots are pretty well set at all the starting positions. I don't see a position right now where they're so weak that a player can come in here and start right off the bat. Outside corner, I think, is probably the most obvious. A lot of people are questioning whether Jalen Mills or Malcolm Butler or whoever, or Jack Jones, who right now is gaining a lot of momentum in that area, can come in and be the top two starting corners on this team. That some people feel that they may want to dip into free agency to bring someone in to be the outside starter. That wouldn't surprise me. I think that is a need. But if you're asking me who I think has the bet come in and maybe be a starter on the team, I think it's going to be at the defensive tackle position once again. And I think it may be our old friend Trey Flowers, formerly of the Detroit Lions. Yeah. He's still out there on the market right now. Trey knows the system very well. It makes a lot of sense for him to come in. And honestly, I can see him coming in late in the game, late in training camp, or maybe midway through training camp, being able to pick up the Belichickian system quite well and maybe sliding into a starting position there. Lawrence Guy, David Godchild, definitely there. A guy that I really love, and I love to see what he can do in this system when he's healthy, is Henry Anderson. But I think that there is some challenges there as well with all the time that he lost last year due to injury. Yeah. If Henry can come around and show that he's more than capable of putting that behind, Patriots may not have a need to bring in Trey Flowers. But if it is going to be the defensive tackle position that they struggle, I can see Trey coming in here. And to me, he's the only guy that could come in here this late in the game and still earn a starting spot. So, Miguel, I hope I was able to give you some insight on that as well. Yes, Countess.
I have one. I have somebody that could come in, that's available,
enlighten us.
that would be a starter. And this is going to shock you completely. That there's people answering. I can hear the answers going around. Ryan Izzo. Dalton Keene's too injured. Devon Asiasi gets bumped, and Ryan Izzo comes in, and he can be TE3 week 1 starter. Write it down, folks. Put your bets on.
Well, we were talking about the Shanahanian system earlier, and one of those elements, is a lot of the blocking schemes that they put out are not given to guards. They're given to tackles, and they're given to tight ends. I'm just saying, Ryan Izzo's still out there. Very good blocker in that regard. Got a little bit of youth, got experience in the system. Folks, I'm just saying, you want to go ahead and install that Shanahanian system, Ryan Izzo might be a guy you might want to give a call to. You will make the Countess very happy here on Locked On Patriots. And we always try to keep the Countess pleased, because what to do if she's not? But no, all kidding aside, folks, Miguel is not done yet in his questions. He's still going. He's got some great questions to share with all of you. And Miguel, the 2 questions that he asked next, I'm the Countess a chance to answer. And Miguel wanted to know what surprised you most about the offseason, Countess, and who do you expect to start training camp on PUP?
I don't think my answer to the PUP one is going to be all that surprising. And I know that was the end of the question, but I'm flipping just because I think that a lot of us anticipate that James White could be starting on PUP. It all depends on what happens in training camp. Well. Granted, we're talking about this before we've had training camp, so a lot of this can change anyway. But I definitely think, and I don't think it's a shocker, and I think a lot of people are expecting that if James White is coming back, then it's going to be a PUP designation. And to be honest with you, I'm okay as long as he's in the fold. It makes me feel better. As long as as long as you've got James White, the Patriot, feels a little bit better. Obviously, we'd always want these guys on the field, but I think as long as he's still with us, then that's the key. Now, to flip back to the beginning of the question. So sorry, Miguel, I know I kind of answered this out of order, but what surprised me most off season, I had two parts to this, because I had my sort of more obvious part that probably a lot of fans would agree with, and is quite a hot topic, and it's the sort of the coaching moves that they've had, or the lack of some of the coaching moves that they've had. And I'm not really surprised that they haven't named a play caller, because it's so Patriots, so Belichick, it's so like we've seen this sort of thing so often. How can we be surprised at his behavior, kind of thing? It's so annoying, granted, because people just want to know. We just want to know the information. But I think the sort of the lack of additions to the increased subtractions of coaching I did find surprising. But the thing that if I want to pinpoint something very specific, and we want to talk, very random specifics, it's actually the loss of fullback, particularly because, as we talked about at the beginning of the conversation in regards to the Shanahanian offense and things like that. That is a position that's utilised. You've got this strength, this blocking ability in a fullback in Jakob Johnson. So to have lost that, to have lost the FB off the roster as we record this at the beginning of July, of course, they may bring in, we don't know. But yeah, in regards to that's the sort of random specific little thing that had me surprised, mildly concerned, also. But it is a bit of a wait and see. So I'm not really getting my feathers in a ruffle about it just yet. But because they utilised a fullback, because it's been something that the Patriots have been very invested in, mainly for the James Devlin time, and granted, and because it's the way that we look at the offense evolving, as we've mentioned significantly during this show, the lack of fullback, or the losing of the fullback, shall we say, I think is maybe a pinpoint of what had me kind of ClazzyClare, the fan, most sort of surprised during the off season, when we're just talking small specific randoms.
Absolutely. And I think that you've definitely nailed it. First of all, I think the coaching decision is probably the biggest surprise of the offseason. If we're doing a poll, and I know that a lot of our listeners have weighed in on this, not hiring a dedicated offensive coordinator, going with the split of Joe Judge and Matt Patricia, really, I think, is a concern of a lot of fans. And look, I'm not above saying that, oh, don't be concerned, in Bill we trust. No, there's levels of concern there. I mean, neither one of these guys have coordinated an offense at a pro level full time. So you naturally have that concern. The one thing I will say to help quell that a little bit is both of these guys have been head coaches in the league. Whether you agree that they've been good head coaches, bad head coaches, whatever, they've held the job. And they did hold the job for multiple seasons. They do know the ins and outs of all areas of the football field. It's not like, oh, Joe Judge is just, special teams and he can't do anything else. Or Matt Patricia is only defense. He can't do anything else. Matt Patricia started off as an offensive lineman. He started off on Dante Scarnecchia's stats. So there are elements there that I believe give fans, media, whoever, players mostly, a little bit of positivity there as well. So I agree with you. I think that's probably a big, concern. I knew you were going to mention the fullback, and I'm glad that you did, because that is something that I think is a little bit of a concern for some. I know a lot of people have said, well, naturally, Jonnu Smith is going to take some of those snaps, maybe Dalton Keene if he can stir, but without having that dedicated source that you've had these last few years, whether it be James Devlin for years or whether it be Jakob Johnson, it's a difference in cadence. It's a difference in what this team is going to do this year. So that is a concern. I do like those two. Choices. Very quickly, before we wrap things up here, I just want to offer mine, Miguel. My biggest surprise, other than the coaching staff, which was the biggest surprise to me, was Malcolm Butler's return. Not because of the need at the position, because of the player. And I love Malcolm. This is no way a negativity toward Malcolm. I was so glad to see him come back to the fold here in New England. But the way things ended the last time just didn't instill you with a whole lot of hope, a whole lot of I think realism in terms of the thought that someday he would end up back in New England. But to see him back here and to hear how dedicated he is to helping the players that he's working with this year, being a mentor, and really, I think, taking that role seriously, tells me an awful lot about Malcolm Butler. So that was a pleasant surprise for them coming back. So, I would definitely wanted to add Malcolm Butler to the list there. But what was your biggest surprise, folks? What are you most concerned about? Just because the mailbag is closing up here today does not mean that we don't want to hear from you. So smash that subscribe button, comment on the YouTube page, or drop us a line on Twitter at LO_Patriots, and let us know what your answers to some of these questions would be, and also what you're looking forward to most with training camp. Countess, yet another mailbag episode, another midweek episode has gone by the wayside, but it has been an enjoyable experience as always. And I always thank you for bringing your wisdom and counsel, and a special thank you for helping to keep the Locked On Patriots mailbag afloat this week. Claire was out there really, actively
I was
looking
doing a
for
Matthew
questions.
Judon this week.
She was really doing a great recruiting session while I was Bill Belichick fishing off 7 rings or 8 rings now off the coast of Nantucket. She was doing a great job of trying to keep free agents in place. So thank you so much, Countess. Always honored, always humbled by your presence. And we always look forward to having you here on Locked On Patriots. And with training camp approaching, folks, we will continue to bring you the latest news each and every day here on the Locked On Patriots podcast. Before I let you go, Countess, any parting words of wisdom to our adoring public?
Look forward to training camp.
That's it. Absolutely. I look forward to training camp as well, as you all do. So, folks, please continue to keep it right here on Locked On Patriots for all of your daily news, notes, and analysis, even sprinkled in with the occasional opinion on your 6-time Super Bowl champions. Once again, Locked On Patriots, free and available on all platforms. So download, subscribe to, and follow wherever you get your podcasts, and smash that subscribe button on YouTube. And now that you've made Locked On your first listen today, make your second listen our good friends at Locked On NFL. Baker Mayfield is a Carolina Panther. That story and so much more when it comes to all the national stories in the NFL, right on the Locked On NFL podcast, also free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Until the next time, folks, on behalf of the illustrious ClazzyClare Cooper, the Countess of Claz herself, I'm Mike Debate. Continue to stay safe, stay well, be the change that you wish to see in the world. Have a great day, everyone.